All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Brady Chisana. Super excited for today's show, guys. We have an awesome guest here. Emily Gray is joining us from Playvox, and Emily's going to share not only her story around becoming a customer-focused business leader, but she's going to talk about a bunch of cool stuff that her and the Playvox team are doing today. Emily, why don't you start off today's show? You're the Chief Customer Officer at Playvox. How did you get into this space? How did you find your way into working in customer experience and customer success? Please take the mic over and give us a sense for how you got into this whole crazy world.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. So I'll just kind of get right into it. So I've been part of the Playbox team for 3 years now. So as Chief Customer Officer, I lead our customer-facing teams, right? So focusing on having the best experience for customers at every touch point, every interaction. So kind of think of that entire customer journey. So my role today includes our solution consulting and services teams, our delivery teams, our onboarding, project management, customer success managers, and our global customer support. So really kind of anything that touches that customer falls within customer success. My background, as you said, my background is in customer success, customer facing roles. So all very different roles I've had over the years, but all focused on that, customer facing. So, kind of started in that back of the house, operations role. What's kind of, feet on the ground, right? Being able to get into the weeds there. Solutions engineering, big on how to make what we're selling to customers, how to go and actually implement it, right? How to solution customers, making them feel better about what the change management that they're going through. I think a big piece is, seeing a need and creating a position there. So many of the positions that I've had in my career were net new. So meaning that there was nobody in that role. Obviously that depends on, the type of company you work at and, the products that you have, but being able to say, I see a need that can help our customer experience in this capacity, and then creating a role, and then really kind of, parlaying that into a department, parlaying that into kind of the journey there. So my background's kind of, it's been a few different roles, like you said, but all in a very customer centric, customer facing roles. And the industry has changed a lot over, I won't age myself, but over that time too, right? Where customer success, 10 years ago, that was not a common term that you heard, right? There was different levels of account management and CX and things like that. But now customer success, that is, any SaaS company, like any customer experience company, or a department, if you will, that focuses on customer experience. CS is just, it's you have to have it to do business, right? So
Absolutely.
so a little bit about my team, my background.
I love it. So wait, a couple of things. Number one, your comment about having had multiple times where you had to kind of build a role from scratch. Number one, most people aren't comfortable with that. So kudos to you, Emily, for even jumping into that, because number one, it's hard to fill like an early role where you're basically pitching and pivoting, you're figuring out new things every single day. You're figuring out sort of what the role clarity looks like. You're figuring out maybe what you could possibly measure and manage on it. But number one, so kudos to you for being brave and jumping into that and saying yes to doing that. But I got to imagine, though, now fast forward to where you are today as Chief Customer Officer at Playvox, probably pretty helpful to be able to kind of, you mentioned the customer journey, like understanding the different fields of the customer journey, or the different segments of the journey, or the different areas that happen in it, understanding how a role might even be able to interplay with other existing mature teams, departments, roles. Again, thinking about that clarity piece where you kind of put some definitions around what that role is going to look like, or how it might even expand into a department or team. Sounds like pretty good stuff for kind of setting you up for what you're doing right now. Meaning it was probably some of the early building blocks around just how to think strategically and how to think, be innovative, and think about sort of what these things can do and how you can really kind of create roles or create focus areas within any business to better serve your customers. So I think that's pretty awesome. That's kind of how you cut your teeth with that.
Yeah, that's true. How to better service customers, like you said. So and a lot of CX folks, they wear multiple hats, right? That term of you do multiple things, and you've got a job description, and then you do all these other tasks that are kind of outside of your job description. And I think, where it comes to need, where you start saying, hey, it'd be great to have somebody focus full time on this, right? So you kind of start, you pick up little tasks and start focusing on it and seeing improvements, seeing customer experience improvements, seeing efficiency gains within your internal teams. And then, that kind of develops into its own business case where you can say, you know what, if I'm only giving 20% of my time to this, task, right? If we actually had somebody focusing on this 100% of the time, look what the impact to our customers could be. And that's how you build a business case, right? So some people might say, I've never built a business case, or like, how do I build a business case for myself, right? It's kind of
Yep.
those building blocks like, hey, this is where you can have it. If we had somebody doing this 100% of the time, this is the outcome that we could have. And then, hey, I've got a perfect person to do that, right? That's me.
Totally.
And so that's kind
Yeah.
of where you can go and kind of develop that, for folks that are kind of in that position where, they might be wearing multiple hats, but when do you kind of say, okay, we need somebody to do this full time, right? It's kind of building that business case and when that makes sense.
I love it. You're spot on, and it's almost way too common to see customer experience, customer success, client services, account management enter whatever type of term different companies and different leadership teams are calling this customer focused these roles, right? These different players of the pitch, but like it's way too common for these roles to get completely like over inundated with all these different tasks and activities and responsibilities, and then before you know it, like there's a million different KPIs and performance metric counts, and not all of them are really truly in their control, right? Like there's like for some of our listeners, if you're not taking time to really kind of minimally once a quarter or once every other quarter, look at some of the KPIs you're putting in front of your CX and CS team and do a quick checklist run through of are any of these KPIs actually in my team's control or in my CSM's roles or in my CXM's control, or are they not, right? Because I think a lot of companies, they kind of get carried away, and there's your comment about our space has evolved rapidly. So over the last 10 years, between customer experience, customer success, there's tons of content out there. There's tons of podcasts. There's tons of playbooks. There's all these different, really great, sets of wisdom and knowledge. But the reality is that one of the beautiful parts of CX and CS, like every company does have a slightly different iteration. Every customer base has got a slightly different set of nuances that they require to really kind of knock it out of the park with them. But I think that it's why this is one of the most fun places and spaces to work in most businesses, I think. Emily, I'd love for you to let's talk about Playvox. Let's talk about your team. Let's jump into the first CX pillar. I'd love to kind of learn a little bit about how the Playvox team has been built. And then I'd love for you to kind of dig in on your team. You mentioned a couple of the teams that you're already working with hand in hand every day, but spend a few minutes talking about how you guys have gone about building, scaling, leading your team at Playvox.
Yeah. So Playvox, for those that aren't familiar, it's a fully digital cloud-based workforce engagement management software. So we're cloud native, digital first, which is very relevant in the world that we live in today. So we have a suite of different workforce engagement management software. So we forecast, schedule teams. We have performance product to track agent performance, measure impact, quality product to measure development and coaching. And so I work with our customers who are also in the CX space, right? Those are who we sell to at Playvox. So I have a very unique perspective, and I'm able to see the view as working with our customers in this space that are, doing the same thing that essentially, we're talking about here. But then also given my role, I also have a customer experience team as well, right? So I kind of see both sides of that. So, I kind of mentioned some of my team, right? Everything kind of customer facing. One thing I will say, and you kind of touched on this, is customer success can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different organizations.
Big time. Big time.
So like clearly defining like what does CS mean for your team? What is customer experience, whatever you want to call it, right? What does that mean at your organization? I think that's really, really important. And that can evolve, right? It doesn't have to be set in stone today. And it's never changing. And actually it should change as your business changes and the market and the industry, like that should evolve. But that's really important to define, like, what is customer experience? What does CS mean at my organization? So I think that's first. And once you get that right, then you can start kind of defining all of those different OKRs. So when we look at, my team, customer success, like I said, is really anything kind of that post initial sale. So anything that touches the customer from the experience that they have with our products to the customer support, to that onboarding experience, to any kind of package services that we have, that all falls within my team. We have a global team, kind of matches the global footprint of our customers as well. That's at the end of the day, like some of the common threads of the team, right? Like customer first, right? And that's the difference when you look at customer success teams. Like they have to be the person that breathes and advocates that throughout the whole organization, right? Every organization, right, likes to say like we're customer first, but it starts with that customer experience team, right? They've got to be the ones that really parlay that into other parts of the organization and are like the living, breathing examples for that. because it is such a, such a foundation of a structure of a company. They're the, what I like to call like the frontline employees, right? Like they hear what customers are
Totally.
saying, like
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
feel that, so they got to get that to other parts of the organization. So my team they work with product, work with engineering, we work with finance, legal, like every single department within Playvox, the customer success team touches. And so it's our job to, to relay like what are customers feeling, what are customers saying, how do they like interacting with their products, what could we be doing better, right? We're the front line, so we've got to kind of push that into other parts of the organization.
It's I say this on a constant basis, and it's so good to hear more and more and more like superstar CX and CSers and customer focused business leaders agreeing this. But I've been saying like for years now, Emily, CX and CS, if done properly, it's a team sport. It is literally a team sport that requires almost the entire organization. And then here's another thing, guys, right? For some of our listeners, if you're working at a company that you're kind of rolling your eyes, or you're saying, well, that's not how it goes here. It's tough because realistically, this is also top down. You need executive buy-in to create that type of culture that Emily's laying out, where it's like, there's an understanding that the minute you kind of paint that customer journey map and you sort of have a really good idea of sort of what your typical customer journey is and all the different ebbs and flows and how they come from the very beginning of the journey all the way to the end of like retention and loyalty and ongoing, continued work with your business, you're going to see so clearly how there's marketing involvement, there's sales involvement, there's operative involvement, there's CX and CS involvement, there's financial involvement. There's like, you very quickly get to see like how there absolutely is a touch and a play for every team and every department in your business. Now, if you're not at a company that's doing that, number one, then you should probably talk to someone like Emily or myself, because it's an easy exercise to get people to realize how to kind of come around the table. And then the other thing is just like, you hear so much talk in business about like silos and having like different departments that kind of build on their own island and they do their own thing and they worry about their own culture and their own politics. But if you look at some of the best companies on planet Earth, I say this all the time. I don't know that you can absolutely completely disrupt silos. I think silos, as companies grow, as they scale, as they get bigger, as more people come on, as more individual talent and expertise comes on in leadership roles. I get it. It's hard, right? You kind of have to build what's in your control and focus on what's in your control. But I think one of the biggest value adders that excellent modern CX and CS leaders do is they just push on that team sport concept, Emily, just like you said. And a biggest part of their involvement in the team, it's almost helping to like orchestrate, right? Bouncing across these different roles, understanding the caveats, understanding granularities, helping to almost paint back a bigger picture of like what the trends or the themes are that you really have to prioritize. So I love it. I love some of the stuff that you're kind of laying out. And I think that it's just so important for our listeners to think about how they can kind of start building some of their own iterations within their own businesses and their own teams around this type of an idea, if they're not already doing so already.
Yeah, it's totally, and it's not going to just be one thing, right? Like I wish I could give you like one magic thing to do that just to make every organization, focus on the customer experience and customer centric. But it's kind of that strategy of little things. So you're talking about customers in meetings, right? If you, depending on kind of your business, right, you're bringing an actual person story to an all hands meeting, right? So in our situation, right, our customers, our end customers are agents within the contact center, right? So they're using our product on a day-to-day basis. So being able to, share a quick 30-second video of an actual user of your product and share that with the entire company, right? Share that with somebody in engineering who might have done the code on that specific part of the feature they're using,
Yep.
right? Or if
Yep.
you have a retail product, right? Sharing the story of somebody that is actually using your product with others, right? Some of those like small things to bring out the customer in every interaction that you have across your different departments, like that falls within the CX team to do that. But again, it's going to be like a lot of little things working with like cross-functional leaders.
Absolutely. 100%. Emily, I'd love to dive into the second CX pillar of tools. I'd love for you to
Yeah.
spend just a few minutes talking about sort of how you and the Playvox team kind of thought about building out and scaling your internal tech stack. And then I'd love for you to expand on the actual Playvox tools as well and kind of give our listeners some ideas for sort of some of the different ways that you're working with your customers, some of the different tools and some of the different solutions that you're really kind of helping to transform businesses. Spend a few minutes talking about tools.
Yeah, so tools, like organizations love tools, right? So tools and solutions can be great, but you have to use like the technology that you're using. You have to use it purposely, right? To make sure there's kind of strategy, right? Kind of be frictionless within your business, and if it's kind of an end consumer facing experience too, like drive that customer experience. I think that like like before we went into tools, like some best practices, right? Like every tool must have an owner. Those that don't have an owner, like they don't get prioritized, right? So if
I
that,
like
you've
that.
got
I like
a
that a lot.
couple people,
You need
right,
to
that
tell
are
some of our
interested.
clients that at CXC, Emily.
Like it has to have one owner, not multiple owners, like one owner that says like, I own the budget, I own the success of this tool. Obviously, like we kind of started in the beginning, like you're dependent, you have dependencies on other departments, but and there's a couple good like TED Talks about this and things like that, but like every tool must have an owner. So that's kind of the first thing. I think the second is like eliminate overlap. So are there other departments that are already using a tool that do some of the same functions that you're looking for? So just being able to do that due diligence, right? Like what else are people using? Because then you get into situations if you do have, a larger siloed organization where like, hey, we've got two tools that actually do pretty similar functions. And then maybe in a smaller organization too, where people feel they feel empowered just to go and make selections on tools. You can see that too. So it's many companies and many organizations across the board might have multiple tools that do the same function. So that's the second. I think that I always look at data, so and tools that we're using, and I'll get there, right? But making sure that you can report on data. What are you trying to get out of the tool, right? Is it exportable data, and then kind of that flows into, does it integrate with other tools that you're already using, or other tools that you need it to be using? So if you're using some type of CSAT survey and then you're also using Salesforce, like do they integrate? Does it matter if they integrate? Are you okay if they don't integrate, right? But being able to do that due diligence. A couple other best practices, right? Like, does it have an ROI? Like, what is the spend to save ratio? Anybody in kind of CX, whether it's a tools, solutions that Playvox is in that space in regards to agent centric tools, or tools that you're using kind of on the back end of CRM for your team. What is that spend to save ratio, right? What is the business case for that? And your partner, your vendor, they'll help you with that, right? When you're selecting solutions, like those are questions you should be asking. Like, what can you help me with the business case, especially if you've never created a business case and had to go to your leadership team and justify that, especially in the market we're in right now. Don't be
Totally.
afraid to ask those
Exactly.
questions. Like,
Yep.
help me build a business case. I really want this. I know it's going to be helpful for me, but I need to have that spend to save ratio. I think that like I'll say the last couple things, like monitoring consistent usage. So now you've got your tools, like you've chosen your solutions, like who's using them? Are people logging in daily? And if they're not logging in at all, like that's not necessarily accountability, as you're not doing your job, but there's an underlying factor of like the tool's obviously not useful,
It's a
right? If
signal.
people
It's
aren't
a signal of some nature.
right, right. It's a
Yep.
leading indicator that this is not, a strategic part of your team, or it's not, if you want it to be, that it's not set up, it's not implemented in the way that's making it, easy for people to do their jobs. And then lastly, like, do you feel supported, right? Do you have a CSM? Do you like, and we're all in the business of
Totally.
customer
Yep.
experience. So, so if I'm using a solution, like I want to see like who's my CSM, right?
Absolutely.
And how are they supporting us? So I think like when you talk about tools like best practices and like, kind of sorting that out first is so important. And before you kind of start figuring out like what tools do we use, how do we use them, what do those look like, what's our budget, like what are your best practices and kind of some of those non-negotiables for your team.
I love it. I think it's such good ideas there, Emily. And like there's a couple build on thoughts from that. It's just like it's crazy how many companies out there don't take time to do regular tech stack assessments. So just the thought of exactly what you just laid out. Lay out your most commonly used tool, your most expensive SaaS solution, however you want to stack the stuff, and then go down the list and understand utilization. I love your idea about utilization rates. It's crazy that more companies don't do this. Like some, especially growth focused companies. Some of these companies were like, a couple $100,000 a year on a SaaS solution could make a big difference. It can either add additional roles, it could be more marketing, you could literally go get the next 2 or 3 BDRs to drive X number of dollars of revenue, whatever, more CS so that you can finally fix the leaky bucket and get more support on retention. And it's crazy how many companies just don't go through, do a basic utilization assessment once a quarter, once every 6 months, minimally once a year. But then one of the things we do with our clients at CXC, we do likes and dislikes. So then kind of jump into the EX side, kind of playing on some of the stuff that you guys are doing in Playvox with helping literal agent experience and employee experience to drive that CX. Then like take time to think about the likes and the dislikes. Like if you have your top 3 tools, 80% of your companies think that they're all terrible and they hate the tool and they think it's the worst thing ever. I don't know, maybe somebody in the business should stop and like take a look at maybe if there's other tools that might make a little bit more sense. The last one is support. I think that this is like something me and you could literally do an entire series on this. The world spends an ungodly amount of money, right? Like I there's some of these reports that I talk about a lot with a lot of our prospects and our clients, but like within the next 5 years, globally, we're going to be spending almost $750 billion on SaaS solutions. And then globally, utilization rates across most enterprise and mid-market businesses floats in the 20 to 30% range. So then let's just stop and think about that for a second. So some of the biggest companies on planet, and by the way, guys, Salesforce does 20 billion a year in revenue, just for context. So like when you start to think about what some of the biggest mid-market and enterprise businesses in the world are doing with the money that they're spending on these tools, and then they only get 20 to 30% utilization rates, that's disgusting. And when you think about what COVID just showed us and what remote work, the transition into remote work normalcy just showed us is like, guys and gals don't want to show up to work and do a shitty job. Guys and gals want to show up and they want to know exactly which tools they want to use. They want to know exactly how you want them to use it. They want to know exactly, most people understand good inputs in equals good reporting out, right? And so like, it's just crazy to me. I think that this is going to be a topic that I think a lot of CX and CSers, whether they realize it or not, they're going to kind of get pulled into this in the next couple of years. And I know really only some of the best and the brightest and the sharpest executive leadership teams in the world even remotely care about this stuff. So on the growth business side, people aren't thinking about, they're thinking about selling. They're thinking about how to get your marketing in the top of the funnel. They're thinking about how to just hang on, right? And keep who you got. And so it's like, this is a whole world that we could go on and on and on about. It gets me fired up because I think that a lot of CX and CS leaders are going to end up owning this in the next 5 years, whether they realize it or not, or they're going to be working with RevOps or their technology teams to do validation and to do basic assessments on the actual facts, like the actual usability facts for both their teams and for their customer bases.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's spot on. And I think people lose sight of like, it's the people that are actually going to transform your organization like through the technology, right? And so if you're doing, so we have a coaching product, right? So we've got customers that are, and we do this with our team too. Like our team, we coach individuals, but it's we're using the solution, we're using the technology, but it's kind of that ongoing coaching that we're doing through the tool, right? The tool's not doing the coaching, the tool's not going, the solution's not going to the end customer and providing a different outcome, right? You're using a solution, whatever solution that you're using, right? To be able to, kind of filter that through the people. And that goes into like the concept of, like digital transformation, right? Like, so we talked about that a little bit too, like, like digital, like you think about like technology, right? That's like tools, solutions, data, like the transformation piece is like, that's like when you actually go to implement it. So how do you get people to use it? Like, what are the processes that you're using? Like, you've just got all these great tools. That's great. But how are you going to use those, right? Like, what are the processes that you're going to take within your organization? And then like your strategy, right? Looking at all your options, like how can you change your business, your outcomes, the business case from that? So, I go back on like, it's the actual people using these solutions, and that's where processes, like that's where those come into place, right? So, we have and I believe this too, like, agent experience. So whether it's agent or customer experience, like equals CX, right? So whether it's you have a team of CSMs or a team of agents or specialists, whatever kind of the nomenclature that you use, but like AX equals CX, like a good agent experience, a good experience for a frontline worker, as we called it, right? Is going to make a good customer experience. And so how do you do that, right? In kind of that communication, how do you do that with that digital transformation? So, kind of going into those processes, right? Like the first is like building the culture. So like building the capabilities that you need for people to be like willing and able, like two separate things, right? Willing and able to use the technology. So a lot of folks, and you kind of mentioned like technology roadmaps and like data roadmaps, like that, like people can get sidetracked in that, right? Like adoption just cannot be created in that like linear manner. Like it has to be part of the plan from the start. So we've just bought a solution, we've just bought a tool how are we going to implement it? Like, what's the change management for us? And that's a big part of like my team from a customer view when we onboard folks, right? Making sure that like change management, you're not just buying a solution, like you've got to figure out like how you're going to implement it, right? How you're going to get adoption, how you're going to get people to ensure that this is going to help them in their role, right? So I think like technology investment first from business case and then from the technology and having those business outcomes to get traction within that digital transformation, right? So that's kind of like the first concept, like kind of build that culture, and then you kind of go into like the people, right? Like helping people to learn, like different than teaching people. And so we didn't talk too much about like the team and like kind of investing in the team, but like a good example is that just like how do you invest in the team, right? Like talking about which like super passionate about like this idea of like data driven decision making, like data
Absolutely.
driven, like
Yep.
how often do you hear the word data driven? Like
Not
how
nearly enough. Not nearly enough, right?
like data driven, right? Like it's but nobody, like it's one of those things like nobody really knows what that means, right? And so like I think the idea is like how do you build a culture that is data informed rather than data driven, right?
Totally agree with that.
you
Exactly. Yep.
know so you're not making decisions just based off on what's on a spreadsheet, right? So your customer, if you did a survey and you've got one piece of data here, your team is saying one thing, but you're making decisions based on your inferences, right? Your
Yep.
experience with the data. So I think that's a big piece, like helping your team to learn, helping your team to learn um, how to ingest data and then how to make decisions off the data, because that's what all these solutions and tools are doing, right? They're
Big time.
outputting data for you. And
Yep.
like, what do you do with all that data? Like, there's so much of
Wait,
it.
and here's another thing that I love how you kind of dissected this, but like there's the data decision making, and then there's the data informed. And guys, listeners, please just start there, listen to that, because what Emily is saying is spot on. You don't, okay, let's say you have a 400 person company. You don't need 400 people in the business to know how to think strategically and intimately about data governance, data structure, data cleanliness, the way that you like literally house and format your data. You need a handful of people to do it well. You do, however, want 400 of your teammates extremely well data informed for their
Yeah.
for their given areas. Or I would argue, this is going back to kind of what we were chatting about at the beginning of the show, but like if your business already has like a voice of customer task force, awesome, because then the VOC task force can really kind of take the good, bad, and the ugly from marketing and sales and customer success and DevOps and maybe even some of the other more administrative things that our customers or our users kind of go through on the back end. But if your company's not taking some time to sort of show a bigger picture of what that voice of customer or that drumbeat or that pulse of the customer is kind of saying, feeling, hearing, suggesting, every month or every quarter, minimally should be quarterly. It should realistically be every month. And some of the best companies do this stuff on like a bi-weekly basis. I understand that volume is at play here, right? So some really, really big companies, 2 weeks pass by, they might have 1 million tickets. That's a lot of data to
Right.
play with.
Right.
For those
Right.
focused
Right.
companies that are focused on their first maybe 10 to 20 million bucks, it might only be a couple hundred things to look at. And sometimes you can draw good stories and good conversation and good dialogue off of it. And sometimes you can't, because it shows you a basic type of a direction. But like, for our listeners, just what Emily just said there is super important. Who in your business is the strategic data engineers and the folks that can truly help you crafting the story? And then who are the folks that need to be data informed? And how can you, as a CX and a CS leader, play a role in all that? Because frankly, the people that do that really, really, really well, they become chief customer officers, and they become people that are in a really unique position in the executive suite, which is they kind of bounce across all the different departments and teams, and they help to weave the story together. They help to weave the opportunities together, and then they keep the executive leadership team, they keep them honest about the things that the market will and won't put up with, or will or won't spend money on, or will or won't leave you for. So like, I think, and this is why this is an exciting time to be in our space, Emily, because there's going to be more and more incredible opportunities where companies are going to want people like us who are sitting in those meetings, sitting in those strategy sessions, sitting in those product roadmap build outs and prioritization sessions, helping to lead the charge based off of what the customer is saying, feeling, and really kind of believing.
Yeah, I think that that's like spot on, right? I think like you have to build that culture where it's okay to ask questions about the data, right? And like I said, like it doesn't tell you what to do. The spreadsheet does not tell you how to run your business, right? And it doesn't tell you what customers are saying. It's your interpretation and your judgment of the data that can actually drive the change. And so folks that are in kind of that very, very customer facing role, figure out how to tell that story, right? I think you said it right, like how to weave that story up to drive like actual changes within the business, actual process changes. And then, that's kind of like that last piece of like the feedback, right? Like getting experience from, or excuse me, getting feedback from the experiences that your customers have, from the experiences that your CS team has. Like there's so much data, like in nuggets everywhere, right? And so being able to pull that out, and then like I said, like having the culture that people like, it's okay to ask questions about the data. Like I'll like reiterate that, like building a culture where like it's okay to ask questions about the data. What is the data saying? What do we want it to say? What needle are we trying to move? Like it's all about outcomes, right? So we've got this piece of data over here telling us, our inferences, right, say that
Yep.
customers are acting in this behavior. Where do we want it to be, right? And what's the story that we're trying to drive
Story.
to the other parts
Totally.
of the business,
That's what I
right?
was waiting for you to say. I knew you were going to say that. It's the storytelling, guys. Like the minute that you might not think that you're like super sharp with data or with data science or with analytical assessments, but like frankly, you don't have to be. If you understand what, like Emily said, if you understand what the numbers are suggesting, you understand what the data is potentially indicating. Frankly, I think the deeper I get into my career, Emily, I'm starting to realize most executives just get excellent at storytelling with data, right? So like they understand the piece of like, you can't just come up with a bunch of like random stories that aren't backed by anything specific or in real life. But the minute that you start to tell stories based on, hey, here's what I learned over the last quarter about these 100 accounts, X, Y, and Z. Here's what I learned about the way that these 100 users used our product last month, X, Y, and Z. The minute you start getting into that type of world, number one, I promise you, you're going to get invited to far more executive or extended leadership team meetings because they're going to want you to report out on this. And then storytelling, like anything, is a practice skill, right? The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And then on top of it, the better you get at sort of seeing how some of your comrades across different aisles, how they might maybe tell a marketing story with that, or maybe how they tell the sales and revenue. I mean, sales and revenue, there's some of the reasons why they make the big bucks is because they have to tell the story every damn month on what you're going to sell, what you're not going to sell, what you maybe you're going to lose, what you maybe going to upsell. But now CX and CS, enter CX and CSers. This is like a time to shine because we're looking at the journey. We're looking at the entire customer journey. Plus, we understand support and success metrics typically better than anyone in the business. So, to your point about after a deal crosses the finish line, we're the retention experts. We're the people that are either going to make or break that LTV, getting to whatever you project your LTV to be at. And then, second of all, we're the ones that think about where upsell, cross-sell, retention, expansion, promotership. We're the ones that engineer and craft and author that stuff, right? So, all fantastic ideas. And by the way, these were all perfectly fit inside of our third pillar process. So thank you for the digital transformation part too, Emily. You're right. It's like taking some time to think about all the different pieces that you laid out there too. Super imperative for a growing business and taking time, at least I would argue, setting some type of cadence, again, whether it's a monthly or quarterly, but like super important to take time to sit down with your team and really kind of think about how you're actually leveraging or building or acting on your own digital transformation experience internally and externally. So I love it. Emily, let's jump into the fourth and the final pillar of feedback. Dual-sided question. So I want you to break this up, but I'd love to hear how you and the team at Playvox are kind of thinking about how you collect, leverage, and act upon your employee feedback. And then I'd love to kind of hear how you guys are leveraging your employee feedback today as well. So customer feedback and employee feedback.
Yeah, so I'll start with the employee feedback, right? So one, like we ask our employees, right? I think that's the first thing is like, are you asking the questions? And then you can get into like, are you asking the right questions, right? So so whether it's a survey, so we have a survey that pops through Slack for just our employees, just kind of a state of how are you feeling, how is kind of work, right? How the very general questions, right?
What type of
But
cadence, Emily? Are you guys doing that monthly? Are you doing a weekly?
so so we do it monthly. Yeah, so it's a monthly survey that pops to employees that they can then go and fill out, and it's all anonymous, right? For just for us to get again like a pulse on employees. Like, so there's questions on work-life balance, right? There's questions on like, do you have all the physical structure, a desk, a chair, like do you have that stuff, right? Which was definitely very relevant in 2020, right? As a lot of people are working from home and that was kind of new for many folks. And then just like, how is your workload, right? Are you on track to like the vision of the organization? Like, do you feel challenged? Do you feel career opportunity? So there's just kind of that, the things that are applicable to all, right? All employees, some of those questions, but again, asking the questions are the first way to start. And you don't have to have, going back to tools, like you might say like, oh, we don't have budget for a tool. Like you could put it in like a Google form, right? You could put it in a Google survey, right? Like you don't have to
100%.
have like a
Literally
fancy tool for
everyone
that.
has these tools. You're spot on.
Yes.
Everybody
Like,
has like the basic version of these tools that you need to do some of this
yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Yep.
And if and if you say, you know what, I'm not prepared, I'm not resourced to like start doing like a monthly survey, like don't commit to like, hey, we're going to do this monthly survey for all of our employees, but just have it be kind of a beta or like, one time, hey, we just want to send out this, 2023 survey on, on for our employees, right? Ask a series of questions, right? It can start as kind of a one-time thing if you're not already doing it. And if you're not ready to do it to your whole employee base, like start with your team, right? So kind of going into like a little bit more like what am I doing within my team? So doing collecting information after events is really, really important. So, kind of, I gave the example of like surveying like your entire employee database at different, at different times. But then if you have an event, so if you think of if you've got a kickoff, if you're bringing everybody in person together, are you surveying people after that, right? Are you like, again, asking questions like, was it valuable? Was it good use of time? Did you enjoy the travel? Did you not enjoy it? Right? Just some of those like general questions that we think we know the answers to, but when you actually like ask people in that format, you might get very different results. And then there's kind of that second piece when you think about event triggered surveys for employees. If you do a training, so we do, training, like training is just so, so important, right? And we talked about that a little bit in like tools and processes, but it's something that happens not just once, but it's continuous. You have to train for new situations, for new use cases, like it keeps people engaged. People want knowledge, they want to grow, they want to learn, which is also very important when you're looking at like the demographic of your team. Where are they at in their growth and career journeys, right? That training. So surveying employees after you do trainings, right? After you have an event that you might intro a new product, those repeatable processes and being able to like take that data you've got the survey results and then you can implement that into your next training like is really, really important. So those are just a couple examples like how we're surveying like our internal team. Like I said, we'll do things kind of at a company level, and then I'll also do kind of pulse checks for my team. So it might just be a smaller survey. It might just be an individual like asking questions to specific teams, within kind of my larger customer success org, right? Asking questions to just the onboarding team, right? Some really, really targeted questions to them. So I would say like start with the questions. Like, are you asking the questions to
Yep.
your team before you even say like, what do I do with the results?
I think that's super smart. And then I really like your idea of just general like the events. Like every one of our listeners knows what common events on both a customer and an employee side happen, right? Onboard, like closing a deal, onboarding, starting a new job. You just hired 5 new CSMs. Great. Oh, you just finished CSM onboarding. Oh, great. You finished client onboarding. Great. Like
Yep.
there's milestones that all of you guys can easily just write down and get on a list. Think about how you kind of hit those milestones for feedback, and then you start to compartmentalize feedback in a very different way, and then you can get away. Look, I know a lot of people love NPS, a lot of people love CSAP, but like they're not the only ways that you can collect and leverage
Yeah.
feedback, as there's other creative
Yeah.
ways, and then make it fun too. I think that's the other thing. So like I've seen a lot of the clients that we're working with at CXC, Emily, do some really fun things around like it can be about your CX and your EX, but there's other ways that you can, it's a snapshot in time to get a count, a measure, or a pulse on specific big things that are happening in your business. So I love that idea of like figure out what the milestones are, figure out what the events are, and then start to build some of your reasoning around what types of questions you're going to ask from that. I think it's really, really smart.
Yeah, and you can take like what you're doing internally, like take those to your team. So we kind of do that same thing with customers, right? So voice of customer is really important, right? Whether it's at a proactive, like you said, or like a reactive. So within CS, you can kind of think reactive. Customers put in a support ticket. We're sending them out a survey like, how was your experience with support, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. So it's very reactive, right? They came to you for a question, and now we're kind of surveying. So those are definitely useful results and stuff that like you want to do. But then there's the other side of that is that like proactive survey. So 6 months into their customer life cycle, right? If you think about their journey, so kind of post onboarding, they're now 6 months in. Like, how was your experience with your customer success manager? How was your experience going with our product, right? Depending on kind of your customer, whether it's B2B or B2C, but that like proactive survey results. And there's a lot of best practices about surveys depending on if you're looking for like research survey where it is you're setting up, hey, this is going to be a 5-minute survey, right? Or if it's just like 2 to 3 questions, right? Customer effort score is also, you mentioned NPS, like customer effort score is something that is, I think becoming more and more prevalent. Like, how easy is it to do business with you? How easy is it to use
It's
your
pretty
product?
straight. It's pretty straightforward. I'm a big fan of the of customer effort scoring as well. And you're right. It's just straightforward. It's plain, and you're not asking these weird questions where whoever the respondent is kind of feels like they got to give a different type of answer. It's not, it's like, it's plain Jane type of question. It's like, how easy was it? And it's, again, most growth companies, they're not leveraging this accordingly. They focus so much on NPS, and it's like, you're right. Like, once you start to get past maybe that first tranche of growth, or maybe your first stable of 10 or 100 or 500 customers, like, you can get creative with which cohorts you want to blast different types of surveys to, or different types of counts and measures on. It gives
Right.
you a more holistic view.
Right. And you can kind of start segmenting, because you want to be careful, right? Like, you don't want to send out 20 surveys within 30 days, right? On the very drastic side about different topics. So you do have to kind of look at the customer journey. Okay, they're in this onboarding phase, they're in this kind of middle phase, now they're in maybe a renewal phase, or whatever again, your services are, and what's appropriate at that time, and kind of segment it out that way. But like, that's good data. Like, you have to start with just asking the questions. And so if you're not doing surveys on your customers, right, pick what part of that experience is most important for you. So you might say, onboarding is so important. We want to make sure after a customer gets into our product, like, they are having a great experience. Then start with that. Start with like the onboarding experience. Or if you say, support, like, our product, it's a freemium product, and like, support is what's really, really important for us. Like, start with support, right? Making sure that like you've got that survey, and then you can kind of build on that, right? So we are at a more advanced stage of our I'll say survey life cycle, right? Where we do have tools to be able to survey our customers as well. And so but kind of mapping that out, right? Where we didn't start there, right? When you kind of going back to that, like, jack of all trades, when you've got people that are doing many tasks, right? But be able to kind of segment, okay, this is what's really, really crucial. And lastly, I'll say, like, any survey results, like, you got to do something with the feedback. So be prepared to like take the feedback and do something with
Yes.
it. So it's great
Yes.
if you survey your employees or your customers, and they all tell you, you got to do X, Y, and Z, or would have been great if you would have, sent me a meeting invite, on a Monday instead of a Tuesday. Well, then start sending the meeting invites on Monday, right? Like, you've got to
Totally.
actually take the survey results and like make change. And I would say, like, if you don't have the capacity to do that, like, limit the surveys, right? So that's why you're not
100%.
creating a survey about support and onboarding and all these different processes. Like, if you're saying, I only have the bandwidth, I only have the resources right now to make changes within my my onboarding process, focus on that, because you'll
Yep.
get the results, and then you can make the changes, right? So sometimes, like, going back to our data, right? Like, all these data informed decisions, there's so much data. Like, what do you do? What do you do with all the data? So
What do you do
that
with
would
it
be
all?
kind of my advice. Like, if you're gonna ask people how they feel,
Yeah, right,
it's
right.
like, and if you put it into like actual like consumable, you're asking people how they feel, like, you've gotta take that and make changes with it, right? So
100% agree. Yep. That's why I was just gonna say, that's why I delete every one of my airline surveys. Just gets a delete, because it's like, you guys are so good at asking all the right questions, but what's changed about airlines in like literally 37 years? What has changed about them? Nothing. So like, but great point. And then especially with our growth focused listeners right now, Emily, if you're working at a startup, if you're working at a growth focused company, you're a Series A, B, C, and beyond, you guys are building. You're literally building. You're figuring stuff out. Nothing's guaranteed. Stop listening to your leadership team if they're telling you it's guaranteed, because that can all change quickly, just as fast as it is to build a company from $0 to $100 million company in 5 years. It can go the other way too. The
yeah.
way that you combat that, you're right, it's taking action regularly, daily, hourly, on the feedback that you're getting about your product, your service, your sales, your support, your success, all the stuff, your content, the marketing content that's out there in the world. You got to be taking action on that. So fantastic advice there, Emily. Emily, before, this has been incredible, awesome ideas in the 4 pillars, so many good examples and golden nuggets for our listeners today. Before I let you go, where can people find out more about Playvox, and then where can people get in touch with you, Emily, if they want to reach out to you, and if they want to wrap more about all the awesome things that are happening at Playvox in the CX and the CS world?
Yeah. So playvox.com, we've got a lot of great info just on our products, our LinkedIn page. We've got a lot of really great customer brands as well. And so they've done a lot of really great things, and they have, some fantastic stories about how they've changed their space, they've changed CX. And so we've got a lot of that content out there within our website, and then our, our LinkedIn page. And then, for me, like, I love, love, love talking to folks and connecting with people on LinkedIn, especially those that maybe are kind of starting out, like you kind of talked about early on, right? Starting out, and, they don't know where to start, right? They've got kind of they maybe wear many hats, and they're looking for, kind of their next move, or figuring out how to make it. So absolutely, like, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with anybody. I'm happy to chat one-on-one as well. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Love it. Awesome. Emily, it's been our absolute pleasure having you on the CX Chronicles podcast. Can't wait to see what you and the team at Playvox do next. And I'll look forward to keeping in touch with you moving forward in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.